So we've got Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Minnesota, and California and Massachusetts represented, which is absolutely great. And it's great to have everybody here. And this session works extremely well by Zoom. So if it's only Zoom, that works. I want to acknowledge the many people who or agencies and organizations that co-sponsored this conference. It's an array of national and local Massachusetts religious and more secular organizations, synagogues. So it's great to see so much going on, and so happy to have you internet and have you nationally. So I normally give this presentation to people before holidays, like before Thanksgiving or Passover, where they're absolutely dreading that conversation with the table with their cousin who is absolutely opposed to anything that we do, and they think climate is a hoax and all this kind of stuff. But I have a feeling this is a very different, more sophisticated audience. So what I'm going to be doing now, I've never done this before, but I think you guys can handle this. We're going to talk about what is misinformation and disinformation. And I spend an awful lot of time when we're talking in conversations about people dealing with how do you deal with your neighbor, your cousin who has a very different opinion. But now I'm going to be giving you a lot of quotes from our current administration in Washington who have come out with the most ridiculous information, which we know is clearly not true. For example, the stunner that came out just recently is from the Department of FEMA, the people who do protections of people after they've had disasters and help them rebuild. I did not know the United States had had a hurricane season, which those Hetty lives in New Jersey. I don't know how close you live to the coast, but even if you live in Minnesota, you still know you hear about these hurricanes. Hurricane season starts June 1st and it goes until November 30th, and they're talking about extending longer and longer. The same thing with fire season. It used to be 3 months. It's now I'm sure that Amy knows that fire season can go all year long. So that is a classic example of disinformation, DIS, disinformation, because what disinformation is trying to manipulate people, knowing that they're lying, they're intentionally spreading lies. Misinformation is out of ignorance or an error. And an awful lot of the dialogues that we have with other people can be disinformation. People are just not informed. They read something, they believe it, they hear it on the news or they see it in social media, they believe it, and they don't bother checking sources out. That's misinformation, MIS. But what people in power do, bad actors do, is they're trying to manipulate us. They're trying to scare us. They're trying to make us get so afraid that they are using disinformation. So whether or not you choose to respond to disinformation or misinformation is really your choice. So we're going to be talking a lot about um, how do you respond to things that you read. So this administration is repeatedly minimizing the impact of climate change. And why are they doing it? So Brooke Rollins, who actually is the agriculture secretary, made the statement during her confirmation hearing, there is no warming over the last 17 years. Clearly, she sees that there's Hetty, I'll be happy to send you all my slides or anybody else. Clearly, she sees warming. I mean, anybody in agriculture must see warming. And the Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of the Defense, says climate change is the perfect enemy. Environmental advocates get to control your life to deal with it no matter what's happening. Why do they say these things? So this is not a rhetorical question. Why are they saying these things that are minimizing climate change, which should just go so much against what we're experiencing? All of us are experiencing this.
I just think they're just trying to manipulate the news.
And us.
Right.
Yep, that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to deny it, they're trying to minimize it. Um, they're manipulating us. Um, and I love when they say if we don't gather the data on it, we don't have to report on the data, we don't have to know about it. So they're using a lot of gaslighting, and that gives them power, and it takes power away from us. They're saying you don't matter, your experiences aren't true. Those forest fires that consumed so much of right now it's Manitoba, but there's always an example of California or wherever. They're minimizing this. So Amy, you live in California. Is the news out there, do they think they're covering it any different recently?
Can you repeat the question?
Is California repeating covering the news differently, you think, than they're doing it nationally when you hear national reporting? Because you've experienced so many forest fires and urban fires repeatedly. I mean, the smoke must be a constant fear for you.
For me, I live on the coast. So erosion is a bigger immediate concern.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if I can answer your question, unfortunately.
Okay.
I mean, I think that because people are living through this, and like I'm a college counselor, so sometimes often the volunteering work that students will do is like round up goods and furniture and things for people who have lost their homes. So I think there's an absolute sense of urgency. I think the way, as media comes to me, I'm a philosopher. I'm trained, and I thought a lot about colonization of consciousness. But I think that what people think, what people outside of California in the disinformation sphere think California is and what it really is just such a total
Hmm.
mismatch. Like, for example, what's ruining, I moved out of San Francisco. I live just south of the city now. But really, what's ruining the San Francisco is not woke people, it's the tech billionaires that are, just milking it dry and not contributing to the community in any way. So I think in general, uh, California has become a meme for the disinformation sphere.
Hmm.
So, and climate is part of that.
Oh, I think your statement is true for all of America. We've come immune to it. We're just not hearing it. And it becomes last week's news. January we heard about the news, all the fires in Southern California, but by February we've forgotten it.
There's so much happening. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, local
information.
local news in Southern California. I actually lived in Southern California for most of my life, and then moved to Minnesota the last 30 years. But uh, I have a friend who lost her home in Palisades and in Pasadena, and so the local news is much more relevant. But the conflict between the president and the governor has created some of the disinformation
Mm-hmm. Yep.
conflict.
If I
Yep.
I could say here in Pacifica on the local level, and I'm new to this community. It's about 5 miles south of San Francisco. It has a famous Taco Bell. It's a surfer community. But and it has like the hills and the valley. The valley is where the coast is, and the coast is eroding. And basically, I forget what the term is, but they want to take, the community that's west of Route 1 and move it up. And it's a huge, again, I'm new, so I don't know a ton, but it's a huge controversy. And so people who are actually living along the coast are opposing the move because everyone, humans are just cling to what they know. They cling to habit, so much of the disinformation preys upon the human weakness of sticking to what we already have and being very and not being able or having a hard time exerting ourselves and doing something different. So.
Right. Totally agree with you. And so does the Union of Concerned Scientists, which has a whole campaign, and I'm part of what they're doing is they've trained people to confront misinformation and disinformation. So what I'm going to be talking about today is very scientifically based. Um, It comes from the Union of Concerned Scientists. It comes from the Yale Center for Effective Climate Communications. So what we want to be doing when you want to decide to respond is you want to include stories. Human beings remember stories, and human beings have their brain is wired around stories. And that's an evolutionary trend from, when before there was anything else, people told stories to each other. So you want to, and that's why good journalists always tell a story. If you read a good journalistic thing, they always talk about an individual. They open with an individual story. So we want to tell stories. We also want to inoculate against misinformation. And Yale has just come out with this. If we start getting ahead of the curve, it's kind of like we want to get a flu shot in the fall so that when the flu comes around, our body is already protected from it. And we want to protect people from the next wave of misinformation and disinformation with some real information. So our job is to include our stories and also to inoculate against misinformation even beforehand. So the number one rule is do not repeat. And this is something that we do so often. How often do we see something on the internet, on social media, and all we do is we respond by repeating it. And the more you repeat something, the more easy it is for people to believe it. So a lie told often enough becomes the truth. So instead of repeating the false information, you want to supply correct information. So you want to replace it with accurate and actionable information. Aspirationals make them feel better, but I think just accurate and actionable is the most important thing. So for the rest of the time we're going to be having here, we're going to practice not repeating, but making accurate replacements and actionable information. And these are quotes, and they're absolutely amazing to me. So one of the ones that I want to start with is something that we probably all have experienced, is we want to stop spreading lies and amplifying it with better ideas. So this was something that was about a month ago. They decided they were going to take the Energy Star program and its energy guide away. And this is what they claimed, because it never has saved people money and it no longer is needed, as all appliances are now energy efficient. So how do we respond to that? If, do all of you know what the Energy Star is in the Energy Guide? The Energy Guide will say how much your refrigerator or your microwave or your appliance will cost you in a year. So it'll give you an estimate, and an Energy Star means it's rated to be efficient. So that's what it's been around for about 35 years, I think. It's for appliances, small and large appliances, and it's an independent organization that evaluates how efficient something is. So how do we replace this blatant lie? The Energy Star program and its energy guide is going away because it never saved people money and is no longer needed, as all appliances are now energy efficient. What do you know that you can write or say that goes against these lies?
Well, I think we need to engage high school and college students. My academic field is in an area called service learning, where kids do service as part of an academic component. And if you can get high school and college students as part of their science programs to start researching these issues and then publishing their results and doing their social media kind of campaigns, that I think you'll have a stronger group of people who can begin to counter these things as part of their academic program. That's what they should be studying anyhow.
And it's so easy to research it these days.
Yeah.
To me, this would be a perfect thing to write to a letter to the editor about, or to talk to the Department of Commerce about, the Chamber of Commerce rather, about, like, people do not want to have this program lost. Actually, Americans have saved nearly $18 billion on their utility bills because of the using Energy Star appliances and the Energy Guide. It's a highly popular program. So who stands to gain the most if the Energy Star goes away?
Companies that make the appliances that aren't energy efficient.
Big business.
Yep. And which business particularly? Does Refrigerator make more money or less money by selling inefficient equipment or inefficient equipment? I mean, does Refrigerator or Westinghouse, or any of the companies that make appliances, LG, any of them, do they care whether they're making efficient or inefficient equipment?
I think it'll make it easier for them if this program's no longer there. So it makes it easier for them not to include things that will cost them more.
Right. They don't have to go out of their way to have scientists and engineers design efficiency products. But who else is going to make the most money on this?
Energy companies.
Energy companies, exactly. And that's who's funding this administration. They're all coming from energy companies. So if we know, I have a freezer that my Energy Guide for the freezer it'll cost me $30 a year, or $30 rather, a year to run my freezer, which is extremely energy efficient. And I bought it on purpose because it was so energy efficient. If I had bought a non-energy efficient freezer, it might cost me $300 a year. So obviously, the electric companies, the gas companies, the oil companies want me to buy inefficient things. So now, how about a personal story about that? I just gave you my personal story about the freezer that I'm using is a very energy efficient store. Do you have personal stories that relate to energy efficiency? So one of the things we want to do is we want to call out the companies that are misleading us. So it's the fuel companies, it's the big government, it's the big industries that are misleading us to think that everything is already fine, and to talk about it from our own experience. So I'll go to another quote. We see no increase in the frequency or intensity of hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, or floods, despite endless fear-mongering of the media, politicians, and activists. This comes from Chris Wright, the U.S. Energy Secretary. Let's talk about a personal story that can counteract this and that is accurate. Amy, does the erosion, do you think some of it has to do with climate change?
It absolutely does have to do with climate change. And I live next, well, a few lots down is totally empty. And it was like in 2017, I believe, they just had to tear down apartment buildings because the coast had eroded right up to the buildings. So, that's a personal story, right? They're like,
So,
I live
connected to
on will probably
climate
not be
change,
there.
connected to climate change, because people won't understand the
Well, I
connection
think the
between
rising sea
erosion.
levels, the rising sea levels.
Okay, so the rising sea levels and
And the more frequent storms,
When the fires, I have a friend in Southern California, all state or State Farm has canceled insurance on all apartment buildings. So
because add the climate change connection. Why are they canceling the insurance?
because they're having too many claims.
Because you got to
Because
be very explicit. You got to put that climate change in your argument, in your story.
yeah, oh no, that there are more frequent fires and more problems with the apartments, and so that's why they're canceling everything.
So people who are trying to get a mortgage who don't have insurance can't get a mortgage.
Yeah, the state has a policy as a backup, but it only covers fire, doesn't cover any other kind of liability.
There are areas where we travel into, let's say, Virginia Beach, more storms, more tornadoes in areas that they've never had them.
Mhm.
And they are raising prices for insurance
Mhm.
for the condos along the beach or whatever because of the endless storms that seem to be happening now where they didn't before, especially in a La Nina year. Last year was incredible and frightening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So these are all great personal examples, which are very memorable, which people can relate to. And the way to make it even better is to make sure you add that link that you know and that it's implicit to you, but other people don't know, which is why we're having more frequent storms, why we're having more frequent flooding, why we're having more frequent fires. And, add the evidence. It has to do with climate change, X, Y, and Z. Sea level rising is because of this. The storms are because of that. So make sure you know some of the points about what the climate change is doing. But, or you just talk about, when I was a child, there were two hurricanes a year, every other year, but now they're more frequent. Are they entirely caused by climate change? No, some of it is also caused by El Niños and things of this nature, but the intensity of them are much greater because of climate change.
I could add one other anecdote, which had to do with the intense fires. It was about 2 or 3 years ago, north of the city, and down in San Francisco for an entire day. The entire day was like an orange brown. It was
Hmm.
dark all day. It was one of the most uncanny experiences I think anybody here has ever had because
And what was causing that orange brown day?
well, it was the smoke from the fires.
Uh-huh. So when you're responding, make sure you add that detail in there.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that
Right.
that's very vivid. I mean, it's
Yes.
extremely like to have an entire day that's literally brown.
Hmm.
You couldn't see New York, you couldn't see New Jersey during the fires in Canada that came down,
Right.
Yeah, we had that in Minnesota. We just had
right?
an air alert for 3 or 4 days because the air quality was so bad.
Hmm.
But I mean, I grew up in Southern California and we had a lot of smog, and I would go to Pasadena and play golf. I couldn't finish 18 holes of golf because I couldn't breathe.
Okay.
So, on an optimistic point, hopefully we can come up with some innovations that might be able to counter some of these things because California came up with change in the fuel and their unleaded fuel, and that helped a little bit, or that helped with the smog situation. Um,
So
so
what you just did was a great aspirational thing. You added something that can make things better. I'm optimistic that technology, or I'm optimistic that we can pass laws, or I'm optimistic. So you just added a whole other piece. So we have a story, you added the aspirational part to it, and now we want to add some actionable things into it. So what can people do? And then you have your whole answer, your whole response.
yeah,
One more thing, in New York, they cleaned up the river, the Hudson River.
Mhm.
Somebody swam the whole thing. Plus, in the 70s and 80s, they were fixing the transportation, which is, worked very well with the air quality and things like that. I think it's slipping now a little, but by the same token, so much has been done, and if they can do it, everybody can do it.
Excellent. So that's a very positive story about it was bad, just the same way Rob was talking about the air pollution was so bad he couldn't play a full round of golf, but it got better because people did something. So it's not saying it's all hope is lost, but saying, things can happen and we can make it, we can push to have it happen. So this is one that is still taking place now. The House bill, the part on the House bill that's taking out the clean energy incentives, they're calling it the working families over the elites. They say only the elites care about the clean energy incentives because only the elites are taking advantage of it. So how would you respond to a claim like that?
I don't have any of the facts on me, which is a question I'm going to have for you in a second, but I would talk about all of the low-income families, low-income communities, and I would bring, statistics about illnesses brought on by pollution in those communities and show that,
Right,
maybe those families are too busy to notice, but it's of interest, it's of concern because it's concentrated where they
right.
are, like Tennessee right now, Memphis. Memphis right there. Musk is poisoning them with building that data center.
Right. Perfect example. It's not the elites that are being affected by the air quality. Everybody's being affected by the air quality. And people who live closer to the industries that are polluting. Look at Louisiana. There's a whole area in Louisiana they call Cancer Alley. So, and they are not rich people. So they may not be buying the electric cars or they may not be putting solar on their houses, but they're certainly impacted by it. So the cleaner we can get the air, the cleaner we can use our energy, the more their health is going to be better. So those are the kind of answers that you want to be giving.
But there has to be a book or something that can be put together with all the things that you've been talking about from all these different states. And there are people, entrepreneurs that are really working hard. Even Bill Gates has 3 different areas
Mm-hmm,
that he's building. So people are doing something. We can help ourselves. And these are the
mm-hmm.
areas that are being hurt. And it's up to government too to help those areas that are underprivileged. And they are
And
doing it. Just
and
who knows?
state and local governments also.
Right.
Yeah. So we're coming up with great stories and great personal responses. I also want to talk about the words we use and how they're important for when you're trying to respond to dis and misinformation. Try not to use the word climate change because people think climate change is natural. And people say it's been happening for generations and thousands of years. Instead, use the word extreme weather. Everybody understands what extreme weather is, whether it's flooding or whether it's freezing or it's tornadoes that didn't happen before or whatever. Another word that to think about changing and instead of using sustainable, especially when you're talking about to Republicans, you want to use the words health and safety. And Republicans are very interested in energy independence. They're very interested in energy security. They don't give a hoot about sustainability, except as in terms of economic sustainability, but they are interested in energy independence and energy security. And this is one that I just learned recently. Warming to some people implies a little bit. It's kind of like if you have a pot on the stove and it's warming a little bit, you're just simmering that pot a little bit. Where if you use the word overheating, everybody gets it. Much more dramatic. So that's a good one to use. People do not understand greenhouse gas emissions, but they understand the word pollution. And you can put the word carbon before that, or you can talk about soot or air pollution or something. So those are ways of changing it. People don't like ban. Ban sounds to them like, oh, you're taking something away from me. You're making me sacrifice. You're making it mandatory. But you can use the word upgrade. So we don't want to ban fossil fuels. We want to upgrade our power plants so that they're cleaner. Another word to use, people don't like transition and transformation. They're scared of change, but they like progress. Carbon tax is something that people have railed against for ages. They don't like taxes. They don't know if it's fair. But if you talk about a fine on pollution, people understand that, oh, yeah, we should be fining pollution. It's the exact same thing, just a different word. Everybody thinks that you're going to be sacrificing when you go greener, but you can talk about you're not sacrificing, you're experiencing cleaner, quieter, and faster. And instead of just calling them big oil, name the companies, Shell, ExxonMobil, or local companies if you know about them. Um, Decarbonized, people don't understand what that means. And we also have that whole industry where they're trying to decarbonize with storage and that type of stuff, and people don't understand it, but they do understand dirty fossil fuel industry. And then my very, very favorite one is the don't use the word natural gas. I was raised in an area where we have an awful lot of what natural gas is, and I just remember, and the people would say natural gas is cleaner, or you want to cook with natural gas. Everything about natural sounds good. And as soon as you start introducing, no, it's not natural gas, it's really methane. Well, methane, nobody wants methane. So use the word, instead of natural gas, you want to say methane gas pollution. That's a way of indicating that this is really harmful for you. The questions about the word use or comments about the word use.
I think it's an issue, but my experience in working with people is a lot of the words, they don't pay much attention to them.
Mm.
It's just climate change is kind of the whole ball of wax for all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the Trumps who say climate naturally changes and it's not a problem, and then you have I think what is most helpful in making an argument is having some numbers to talk about how many hurricanes there are, or how many fires there have been, that people can begin to see if you make a comparison. And some of the slides that were presented earlier this morning, and one of the presentations was pretty devastating in terms of having numbers
Mm-hmm.
to show how things have really changed.
Well, we just not only the numbers, but the severity of them. So categories of hurricanes, number of acres that have been burned, the number of people who've lost their families, their homes, that type of stuff. I mean, that all comes home to people. That's the personal and the understandable as opposed to words.
Yeah.
It's words and stories.
There is a portion, even if you go on a cruise, where they talk about geothermal happenings over time and how that's natural. And at those things, they should put in that what we do as people on this planet is contributing to the severity of it. But they don't do that, and they make it sound like it's a normal part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be corrected too, even if we write whatever letters to to all these cruise lines. Just a suggestion, but it does give a wrong view of everything.
Yep. The travel industry in general, they love to talk about that they're eco-friendly. Well, question them. Are they really eco-friendly? What are their eco-friendly? What actually are they doing that's eco-friendly? And I think it's very important for us to call them out on it and say, no, that's not accurate.
I think organizations can help to frame some of these conversations.
Mm-hmm. They
Um,
sure do. That's why I look to Union of Concerned Scientists, and I look to the Yale Center for Climate Communications. That's where I'm learning these things, and that's where I'm learning how to say things a little bit differently. And organizations that lobby are teaching me that you lobby differently when you're talking to your supporters than when you're talking to other people.
yeah.
So this is an ad that's going around in Washington, D.C. now. It's an ad on TV that's making the decision on budget reconciliation boils down to a simple equation. Lowering tax bills for hardworking families is good. Reckless spending on green energy fantasy is not good. Then the ad goes on to say, eliminating Joe Biden's Green New Deal helps pay for Trump's tax cuts. That's an actual ad that's actually circulating, obviously, to the decision makers. So what would you do to try to counter this claim?
Well, I think part of it, I mean, this is actually part of my academic field of civic education.
Mm-hmm.
I think young people need to begin to learn how to track some of these things in schools so that they can pay attention to them later on. I
Mm-hmm.
think for a lot of people, they just don't pay much attention to the realities of all of these kinds of things in terms of budgeting and taxing and things like that. I mean, most people aren't aware that Trump had the highest deficit ever in the history of the presidency. And people don't talk about that. And people don't quite understand what a high deficit means in terms of the future and how you pay it off and all those kinds of things. So,
So I totally agree with your education thing, but I think we have to go well beyond college students. I think we have to be educating everybody because exactly what you said, the typical Joe doesn't understand any of this stuff, and they're just oblivious to it. So we got to bring it down to, what they are understanding. How much more does it cost you to buy groceries than it used to cost? Is it harder for you to get insurance for your house?
certainly
So,
money is one of the major issues. So,
so if you think you would like to be a person who's actively countering disinformation on social media, I'm part of this Sierra Club activity that's called Truth Tellers. I actually find it kind of fun. They send you two posts every single week, and they just want you to counter it with accurate statements, with personal statements. And if you use social media at all you have to do is write a simple message. I figure it takes me about 15 minutes or half an hour every week at best, at most. And if you're interested in doing it, you now have the skills to do it. They'll also train you on how to do it. So they pick a different topic every week or two topics every week. And then they just say, elevate the truth, and they give you some facts. So if you're interested in doing it, this is an actionable item that anybody can do from Sierra Club. It's Truth Tellers at Sierra Club, or they have a welcome guide. So it's just something that anybody can be doing. And I just, want to leave you with some thoughts that in a time when society is drowning in tsunamis of misinformation, it's possible to change the world for the better if we repeat the truth often and loud enough. And that's the bottom line for what this is all about in terms of repeating the truth as opposed to repeating falsehoods. And don't let people get away with misinformation, disinformation. Call them out and give them information. And that is often a difficult thing, but I send my Congress people, articles for them to read all the time. I don't know whether aides are going to read them or not, but maybe they will.
not to be negative, but I think that it's a much more complicated world with AI and
Oh, no
with
question about that.
young people who don't read newspapers and get
Get
their
it all on
information,
Reddit.
and they get information from the internet and see things on the internet. I have no idea how they have pictures of Trump and Xi and Putin dancing and so they make up all of these crazy things and you just kind of wonder what's real. And you
Hmm.
kind of lose a sense of getting back to your original point about misinformation and disinformation. It's
I truly think that a lot of the younger people, the millennials, are paying more attention and they are reading the news, just not the way we hear it. And they're not doing it from social media, and they're very careful about how social media gets, skewed and all of that. And the younger generation, if you remember when we were young, many of us, you heard about the garbage and whatever, and look what happened over the decades where they now have places and how to change how you throw the garbage and compost and whatever. So things do grow out of craziness, but I agree, it's a complicated situation and If we don't work hard, all of us, it's just not going to get easier. You need the whole picture with the education, the way you said for children and all the way through to now, because we can't wait for the little ones to grow up.
Yeah. So some resources, some of these I've referred to already, the Union of Concerned Scientists. If you want to read about how the disinformation industry developed, read Michael Mann's book on the new climate war, excellent book. The Yale Center for Climate Communications we've talked about. And then some other ones like the one on the bottom, Cranky Uncle versus Climate Change. These are really amusing on how to respond to your climate uncle, your cranky uncle, but they do a really good job of it. And final questions or comments, and I really appreciate everybody talking and sticking through and giving ideas. And I think we shared an awful lot of really good information and a lot of good ways of talking to people about this and personal stories.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, all of the topics that have been covered today have been very helpful.
Good. And I appreciate the fact that they were able to do it remotely as well as in person, because none of us could be able to get there because we're not local.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Bye.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you.